Welcome back to part 2 of the changing imagery of Hatshepsut. In part 1, we looked at the changes. We identified Tefnun's 3 key stages, and we looked at how she moved from being portrayed, first of all, as a typical great royal wife, nothing unusual, but then once she becomes the king, we saw her change from being a female body king through to an androgynous stage, reducing the femininity, but then through to the fully masculinized image. So this video is going to focus just on some of the different ways in which Hatshepsut portrayed herself in this fully masculinized image. So in other words, this is the way that she portrayed herself as king for the majority of her reign. We looked at this one last time. So this is in a devotional attitude with the wide stride and the very broad shoulders. So this statue from Der El Bahari it certainly it's the only one that has survived with the striding stance. Now, to tell you a little bit about these statues from Der El Bahari, one of the things we're going to learn about is the way that Thutmose III basically trashed everything that belonged to Hatshepsut in terms of her statues. From Der El Bahari, for example, he did not completely destroy the temple. What he did do, however, we'll learn, is go around and actually erase her names, hack out her names from the walls, and the statues were removed and they were broken up into small pieces. Now, fortunately for us, the people that did this put those statues into 2 large rubbish pits in the area of Der El Bahari. And archaeologists have come along and in recent times, mostly in the 1920s, Americans, archaeologists were working there, uncovered these pits, and therefore have been able to piece these statues back together. Without this, we wouldn't have any full statues of Hatshepsut at all. And you can certainly see a lot of the crack lines and things like that where the statues have been restored, put together almost like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. One of the sad things is that the uraeus has not been located. These are certainly one of the first things that would have been knocked off the statues during the destruction process. So let's take another look at the way that Hatshepsut uses the iconography of a king to portray herself. So these are what we call ostracized statues. So these are Hatshepsut's face in the body of Osiris. These are, of course, from her mortuary temple, Djeser-Djeseru. That's why we've got Osiris depicted in this way. So the physiognometry, so this is the physiognomy, which means the facial features of Hatshepsut are consistent to some extent across the statue, so we can identify where it is intended to actually be Hatshepsut's face. One of the interesting things, though, is the face colour. So this statue has been painted with a red face. Now, in Egyptian art, males are usually shown with a red face. Yellow is usually used for females. So this is quite interesting that we're clearly seeing Hatshepsut adopting the full male kingship iconography by painting these Osiris statues with a red face, even though it's clearly Hatshepsut's face that is intended to be depicted. Some of the statues inside the temple, also other Osiris statues, apparently first had a pink colour on the face. And some of the modern historians suggest that this was an attempt by Hatshepsut to kind of be somewhere in between being female and male. But Labori has also found statues where he believes that they've been painted over with red at a later date. So gone back and kind of fixed up to adopt a more kingly, manly iconography with some of the works that would have been created earlier, but Hatshepsut's ordered that they then be depicted as male later on. The Sphinx is also a really typical way that pharaohs would show themselves. It's a very powerful animal, very powerful image. And Hatshepsut certainly had a number of sphinxes made with Hatshepsut's face. So in the show, and down the front here, it would have said Ma'at, really clearly depicting herself in this Sphinx format. We know that there would have been about 6 sphinxes that would have lined the processional route, the entranceway into her mortuary temple at Djeser. This one is again really showing off that male body. So you can see how broad and wide the shoulders and the chest is across here. Again, wearing the shenjit, the male kilt, offering up incense. In this case, it tells us on the inscription on the statue that Ma'at, who offers up fresh plants, the incense plants, to Amun. We would have had the false beard here, as well as the uraeus. So it's certainly looking very male, but this is clearly Hatshepsut. This statue is quite interesting because the head was originally found by German archaeologists back in 1845, but when the Metropolitan Museum, the archaeologists from New York, did the later work excavating the pits, they pieced together the body, and the German government kindly donated the head in order to complete this statue. So quite an interesting history to this particular statue. But it's not just the statues where we see Hatshepsut adopting this very clear male iconography. This is a relief from the Red Chapel at the Temple of Karnak, and if you just looked at this, you would assume that this is a male king. It is, however, Hatshepsut. We know that because we have Hatshepsut's cartouches here. So this one, it reads Ma'at, and this one, Hatshepsut. So this is Hatshepsut in her full male iconography as a king, in the royal kilt, with the nemes cloth, the beard, offering incense and other offerings on the table here, lots of food, up to Amun. So clearly again showing that the male king with full power and status of a king. This one is where we start to see Hatshepsut with Thutmose III. Labori tells us from his research that in the first early years of Hatshepsut's reign, from the time that she becomes the king, we actually see a lot of depictions of Hatshepsut by herself. But very quickly we start to see Hatshepsut and Thutmose III both portrayed together. Labori suggests that there are more reliefs with Hatshepsut by herself, but we certainly have still a wide range of examples with Hatshepsut and Thutmose III shown side by side. And this is quite important if we start to think about how power was being shared, the fact that it was a co-regency, not Hatshepsut taking over complete power. So Thutmose III was not rejected as a king, and this is shown through these kinds of reliefs. This relief here is interesting because we've got Hatshepsut on the right-hand side, and we can tell that because that's Ma'at, that is her cartouche there. Thutmose III is on the left, and that is his throne name there, Menkaperre. And Thutmose III is shown here with the blue crown, the Kapresh, while Hatshepsut has got the much more ceremonial crown going on here. But the interesting thing is they are shown the same size, so they both have power. Some archaeologists note that Hatshepsut almost always depicts herself in the dominant position at the front of where they are. Some historians really show that that really means that Hatshepsut was the dominant pharaoh in the co-regency relationship. Other historians really point out the fact that that would be quite typical given Thutmose III was younger, but the fact that we do see these representations with both kings and they are both the same size, some historians really point to that to indicate the sharing of the relationship and certainly not downplaying the existence of Thutmose III as a king. This is another example here. This is a commemoration stele. So here we've got Amun on the left, then we have Hatshepsut here in the more dominant position and Thutmose III here. Again, Hatshepsut is doing the job of offering up incense to Amun, but both kings are here both got a bull's tail, both got the male royal kilt, so looking like two male pharaohs offering up to Amun. Another one here, this one's quite interesting because instead of having two different crowns, this time we've got Hatshepsut, there's Mark Carré there, and Thutmose III in identical clothes and looking, the same war crown and looking quite the same as they appear in this relief, which is from the Red Chapel at the Temple of Karnak. It's a festival scene, but we've got both pharaohs here in identical outfits, identical size. This is the last one I'll show you, and this one is from the Red Chapel again, but this one is Hatshepsut. And certainly if you looked at this, you would think this was a male pharaoh. So she's got the short senjet, the royal kilt looks like a man. So the wide, thin waist, but the wide, broad chest and the really huge, wide stance here. It's interesting to note that here Hatshepsut is depicting herself alone in this particular relief. So what we've got are a range of different ways in which Hatshepsut is depicting herself. If we think back to the first video, remember that Labori suggests that from as early as year 8, we have this full masculinized iconography taking place, but there's a different range of ways, and this would be typical for a pharaoh to depict themselves in these different range. So whether that be ostracized statues as sphinxes or in this way. Thutmose III has not been forgotten completely, but there is an emphasis in all of the reliefs and the statues on Hatshepsut as king, perhaps the dominant king, but certainly in this masculinized way to depict her power and her status as the king. Thank you.